Now we are going to find the coordinates of the stationary point of a given function. Stationary points represent a minimum, a maximum, or a point of inflection. Look at the description. You need to be able to find the coordinates of a stationary point on a curve and work out whether it is a minimum point, a maximum point, or a point of inflection. For certain curves, the function f of x is increasing in some intervals and decreasing in others. We already have seen a type where it is only increasing, and another type where it is only decreasing. Now this type is different. It can increase in a certain place and decrease in another. Look at the graph. For x less than 0, it is increasing, and for x greater than 0, it is decreasing. When x is equal to 0, this is a stationary point. It reached the maximum, then it went down. The points where f of x stops increasing and begins to decrease are called maximum points, like the point here. Notice that the function started increasing, then it reached the maximum and decreased. Okay, now look at this graph. At this interval, the function is decreasing, then it stops at a minimum point and increases. The points where f of x stops decreasing and begins to increase are called minimum points. These points are collectively called turning points, so the maximum and minimum are turning points where the direction changes. And at these points, f prime of x equals 0, so the gradient is 0. You can find the coordinates of maximum and minimum points on a curve. This will help you to sketch curves accurately. Thus, at maximum and minimum points, the gradient is 0, and we can calculate the turning points and to easily sketch the graph. Now let's talk about the point of inflection. A point of inflection is a point where the gradient is at a maximum or minimum value in the neighborhood of the point. Okay, so look at the graph, which is a part of a tangent function. It has a point of inflection. At point 0 here, this is the minimum of this part and the maximum of the below part. Thus, the point of inflection is when the same point is a minimum point for an interval and a maximum point for another. Pay attention to something. Points of inflection where the gradient is not 0 are not included in the C2 specification. That means we won't study about this now. So as we said, some points of inflection do not have 0 gradient. Points of 0 gradient are called stationary points, and stationary points may be maximum points, minimum points, or points of inflection. Look at this sketch. This is function f. Notice that here it is increasing, and then it stopped at a certain point and started to decrease. So point A is the maximum point because it stopped increasing and started to decrease. And notice that here it says local maximum point. That means inside a certain interval, it is a maximum point. And if you look at the entire graph, it is not maximum because here we have points that are higher than A. That is why it is called a maximum local point. Okay, now for B. The function was decreasing, then it stopped at B and started to increase. So B is a local minimum point, and it is local because we have points that are less than B. Okay, now for the 0. Notice that here, 0 is minimum for this part and maximum for this part. That is why it is a point of inflection. It has different points depending on the neighborhood. Now for the calculations. We have steps to follow in order to find the coordinates of a stationary point. Number 1, find dy over dx, or the gradient of f, and solve the equation f prime of x equals to 0 to find the value or values of x. So we find the gradient, then we say it is equal to 0, and we solve to find x. Now for number 2. After x, we need to find y. So we substitute the value or values of x, which you have found into the equation y equals f of x to find the corresponding value or values of y. When you put f prime of x equals to 0, you can find the minimum and maximum at the same time. Thus, you will get two values of x, and you need to find the values of y for them. Finally, this gives the coordinates of any stationary points. So, you need to define if it is maximum point or minimum point or point of inflection.